Redditors who have had stalkers, exes, creepers, etc. What's the craziest/scariest thing that happened? My first serious boyfriend stalked me for about 5 years after I broke up with him. The reason I broke up with him is because I noticed him becoming increasingly possessive and controlling. This worried me a lot, and I was really young. He was older than me, so I decided to get out. The breakup itself was so brutal. He cried and screamed and begged. Initially after the breakup, his behavior seemed like the harmless actions of a bitter ex. Constant texting and phone calls, sending gifts to my workplace, that sort of thing. After about 6 months, when this hadn't died down, I started bumping into him on my way home from work, or if I was out shopping, so I ended up moving. I couldn't leave my job immediately, but moving house didn't make a difference anyway. This behavior continued for a few years. His behavior became increasingly worse. I'd rather not go into detail, and the police were very reluctant to do anything. I moved every 6 to 9 months, and changed jobs twice, but somehow he always managed to track me down. I didn't use social media and even insisted friends of mine not take any pictures of me in case they posted them on social media. I kept my phone number within my circle of friends, but somehow he always managed to get my new number. I ended up a paranoid wreck, thinking that one of my friends had betrayed me, or that my phone company had me listed in a phone book, and all others kinds of crazy thoughts. Then another year passed, and as our encounters got worse, again, I'd rather not go into detail, I decided to report him to the police again, and this time they took some action. At this stage I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat, I couldn't concentrate at work, I was a shell. About 2 months after I reported him to the police, I woke up one morning to a story in the newspapers about staff in the National Tax Office using resources improperly. My ex was the main perpetrator, using his job to access all of my information. In his job he had access to my tax records, which meant every time I changed job, address, or phone number, he had access to the most up-to-date information. Before the court case began, he committed suicide, and I'm not ashamed to say I cried with relief. They were the worst years of my adult life. My ex had a stalker for 2 years. 1 year before I met her, and during the first year that we dated. He would never do anything too drastic, a few phone calls here and there with no speaking. Following her, making her feel uncomfortable. And whenever we called the police, they said there was really nothing they could do, due to the lack of evidence. Really, the final straw was when he kicked in the door while we were home. The alarm system scared him off, but we called the police per usual, and they said they would look into it. I felt that they were taking too long with the whole situation, and decided to take matters into my own hands. I know this is extremely dangerous now that I'm looking back at it, but I was a wild guy. Anyways, we devised a plan. My girlfriend would leave the house alone, and she would tell me if he was telling her. If he was, I would tell him. Well, he was. The fact that he wasn't in jail infuriated me, so I lost it and took matters into my own hands. While my ex went into the local pharmacy, he parked and waited for her. In a fit of rage, I walked up to his car, opened his door, and beat the living shit out of him. I feel I went overboard, because I'm a pretty big guy, and once he was on the ground I began to stomp his jaw, which in turn unhinged it. I told him, if he continued I'd eventually kill him, and he never returned. The guy who was stalking her was, get this, a guy who had a crush on her in high school. Not an ex, not a lover, but a deranged freak. I still have nightmares about the door incident to this day though. I had this stalker throughout high school. She would claim we were dating, even when I already had a girlfriend. I'm Asian and she was obsessed with them. We had one conversation once, and we asked basic questions to get to know each other, and every answer she gave was related to Asians. The creepiest thing she did was give me an envelope and told me not to open it until I got home, but of course I opened it right then and there. Inside were pages of creepy stuff about me. She'd have creepy love letters. She had a page of graph paper in there that had my name written in every single square front and back. She had drawings of me. One of the drawings she had was a picture of me and her making out in the hallway, and my then girlfriend watching us and crying in the background. I told her to back off after that. Story time. I was in middle school, 8th grade, when form spring. me became popular. It's just one of those anonymous question asking websites for those who don't know. Anyways, I had one of those, and one day, Monday specifically, I started getting these creepy submissions saying stuff like, I watch you going down asterisk street after school all the time. And you're so beautiful, I want to rape you so badly. Stuff like that. But at this point, it kind of just weirded me out, and didn't think too much about it, since it was likely a friend of mine just screwing with me. So I took down my Formspring site and went about my day. But the next day, I started receiving really creepy emails from someone I didn't know. They started to get really creepy, mentioning my teachers' names, asking me to meet them at the park so they could rape me, counting down the days I would die, Friday, and describing in detail about how he would rape me, then kill me, and kill anyone else that was with me. So I started getting really freaked out and blocking the emails, but he realized this and started making new emails to send me every day. Every day, he would count down the days until Friday, until my death. I really didn't want to tell my parents this, since I still thought that it was maybe a joke, but I ended up breaking on that Wednesday after my school administration did nothing about it. They kept me in from school on Thursday and on Friday and called the police. The police eventually found out it was just some random quiet kid in my math class, who I've never talked to, nor had mutual friends with. This was probably the scariest thing that's happened to me, just because the emails were so descriptive, and because the kid was just some random guy I didn't know at all. I was so young and all of my friends never took it seriously. I really couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, and I was always shivering. From fear, I guess. Thinking about it just makes me really uncomfortable. I moderate on Reddit, and a lot of people really hate moderators, so I've had a few death threats. The scariest thing is when they start ming with personal information and that kind of thing. I haven't ever had a run-in with anyone from Reddit who hated me, but the things they claim to want to do, behind the guise of anonymity, are pretty creepy. Death threats and other threats of harm and abuse. Just part of moderating, I guess. When I was about 19, I met this guy who worked at the subway near where I worked. He was a nice enough guy and he took me out on a date. Everything started off really well, but about a week into it, he started asking me for money. It started off small at first, like for a soda or $5 for gas. Then he started asking for larger amounts, like a few hundred to get him by for a week or so. I never gave it to him, but he started wanting to move in together within about 2 weeks of dating. When we would go out places, he started to do very weird things. He would start screaming in public or singing nonsense at the top of his lungs. He would always play around afterward that he was just having fun, but it was weird and embarrassing to be seen with him. Also, my dog, who loves everyone, would not let him near me. I've never seen that dog so much as growl at another person, but he would try and bite the shit out of him when he came close to me. By the end of the second week, I broke up with him over the phone. I normally didn't do that, but at the time his erratic behavior made me nervous. He completely flipped the fuck out. He started showing up where I worked to the point where my manager had to ban him from the building and co-workers walked me to my car. He would show up literally everywhere I was, even to the grocery store or the gas station. I started getting text messages and weird email about how we were meant to be and he couldn't live without me and such. Then one day he showed up in the middle of the night and told me to come outside. I told him to leave or I was going to the cops. He literally started sobbing to the point where he was almost hyperventilating. I went back inside and locked the house up. The next day I was home alone and just doing some work. At the time I was in college when I heard some rustling by the front door. I thought it was just the dog messing around or the mailman or something, but the dog started barking and growling. The doorbell began to ring. I didn't think much of it, probably just a solicitor. Someone started messing with the door handle. I grabbed a broom of all things, because that was all I had, and I heard someone open the door. My dog tried to bite him, and I locked myself in my bathroom, and started screaming that I called the police. He up and ran away. I called my neighbor who lived across the street from me, and was former military. He checked out the house, and made sure he was gone. My dog had a few scrapes and cuts on him, but he was okay. I filed for a restraining order the next day and my dad took the liberty of calling his father and explaining what happened. I received a few other emails him following that, but he never came to my house again. Luckily, I've moved a few hours away, and I'm married now, but it was still very frightening at the time considering this was only about a 3-week period. I worked at a convenience store. There is also a halfway house full of medicated/unstable/psycho people around the corner from where I live, so they often come into the store. I was 17 when this all happened. There was this one woman who from afar seemed normal, but up close something was off. Her makeup was a bit weird. She would wear bright red lipstick, sometimes yellow or bright pink, and always a bit messy. She always wore the same thing and walked around like she was slightly confused. I remember the first time she entered the store. She bought a 30-cent pack of gum with a $10 bill. As I was giving her change, she stared at me in a very creepy way. She didn't blink. She complimented me, "You're so pretty and beautiful. I want to be like you," with an eerie grin. Haha, thanks, here is your change. Then she said, "You know I have $1 million. I'm also going to marry Ryan Seacrest and we are going to live on a big house on the moon. I would tell you where I hid my $1 million, but I have the power to not tell you." She also said many more wacky things similar to this. Okay, and off she went. I figure, oh, it's just one of the schizophrenic people from around the corner. They never cause any harm. She began frequenting the store much more. She would enter with a silent smile, walk around the store without breaking eye contact, and leave in silence. Just went in just to stare. I told my friends about her, and they agreed she was creepy as fuck, so I started carrying around pepper spray just in case. Then she began to actively stalk. I would be walking my dog and she'd be staring at me from behind the car. I would be sitting on my balcony, and she'd shout, "Hey Thought Factory, you look so pretty today." I would be walking down a store aisle and she would be behind a rack, giggling and whispering to herself. I'd turn around, and she'd run away. I had it up to here. There were also a few other places where she ran into me. Why the fuck is she stalking me? The final straw was when she broke into my house a few days later, and I have webcam footage of this. I was ready to take a shower on night when I heard the front door open from all the way in my room. I heard a faint OHH, so this is Thought Factory's house. I freaked the fuck out. I turned my laptop webcam on for evidence in case anything went down, and stood over by my phone. I was panicking. I asked, "What are you doing here?" And she asks, I wanted to see if you were in here. Do you have a phone I could borrow? Go use the one outside. I don't have enough money, it's only like 35 cents. I don't have 35 cents. Yeah, well, you can't be in here, so go. She turns around, and I stand there watching her as she leaves. I hear some rustling by my door. I run over, and I see her stuffing some of my family's dirty laundry clothes into her shirt. Leave that alone. That is not yours. She dumps it out with a quickness and runs out the door. I called the police on her, and she never stalked me again. The last night I saw her, she was giving a homeless guy a blowjob outside of my window around 2 a.m. while his homeless friends watched and jerked off. One guy started crying because of envy and stormed off. There was this girl in high school. She wasn't pretty, wasn't funny, wasn't enjoyable to be around, and she needed attention. So she would stalk people. It was my turn when I was 16. She followed me around during school, cutting her classes and following me into mine until the teachers told her to leave. She would show up at my house before school and try to talk to me, then follow me very closely to school. Even when I had morning sports practice, she knew about it and would be at my house at 4:30 am when I was leaving for practice. She would sit there and watch practice, which isn't the weirdest. Girls did that frequently, but as a group, and because one of their boyfriends was on the team, or whatever, she just sat there alone. She would sit next to me at lunch. If all the chairs were taken, she would stand. After school she would watch practice again. I would usually make a McDonald's or Chick-fil-A run with some teammates after practice. She would follow. Then I usually went home. She would follow. She would try to follow me into my home. I would lock doors. She would ring the doorbell and talk to my parents. The first time it happened they let her in. After that first time they didn't let her in anymore, and she would sit in her car in the street right outside my house. She would go home late after dark, and she would be back again at 4:30 in the morning. Weekends were bad. Every Saturday I had to compete, so Saturday mornings I got up early, drove somewhere really far away, other school districts, and she would be there. I would race and do stuff with the team. Coach would yell at her for not giving the athletes enough space. Everything is over. I go home. She follows. She just walks into the house. If you leave any doors unlocked, parents stop responding to the doorbell. One time, my dad, really upset with her, tells her I have a girlfriend and she needs to go get her own life. I didn't have a girlfriend at the time. That just pissed her off. She started screaming at my dad. He closed the door in her face. My mother called the cops. I was in the basement playing Skyrim trying to pretend this wasn't happening. Next time I saw her was at school. She yelled at me, slapped me for cheating on her, cried very openly and loudly. I just walked past. She followed me around bawling. Followed me into classes, crying. Followed me at lunch, crying. After practice in the afternoon she walks up to me and says she forgives me and we can keep dating. Nothing you can say registers with this girl. This goes on for about a month. Then she moved on to a new boyfriend. She did this to about 9 dudes over the course of 3 years. Where is she now? She made a porno. It's gross. Trust me, you don't want to see it. She did it weeks after graduating high school, while she still lived with her family. And then she sent the links to people so everyone would know. As far as I know she still just does porn, but it's been a few years since I've bothered to check what's been up with her.